So as we were saying, we use linear regression in order to find the parameters a and b in the equation y is equal to ax plus b. In our example, y is the GPA and x is the attendance grade. Now, if we said that the concept of the slope, which is a, is very important. This is why I would like to explain what it means using an example. Assume we have the linear equation y is equal to 3x plus 2 over here. Now, if x is equal to 2, then y is going to be 3 times 2, 6, plus 2, 8. And if x is equal to 3, then y is going to be 9 plus 2, which is 11. Notice here that when x increased from 2 to 3, which means that when x increases by 1 unit, y increases from 8 to 11, y increases by 3. This is the definition of the slope. The slope is the amount by which y increases when x increases by 1 unit. So whenever x increases by 1, y is going to increase by the value of the slope, which is 3. So what this tells us is that when the independent variable increases by 1, by how much will the dependent variable increase? Let's now look at an example in which the slope is negative. We have the exact same equation, however instead of 3 we have minus 3. When x is equal to 2, then y is going to be equal to minus 3 times 2 minus 6 plus 2 minus 4. So when x is 2, y is minus 4. When x is 3, y is going to be equal to minus 7. So when x increased by 1 unit from 2 to 3, what we actually see is that y increased by minus 3. So y decreased by 3. Again, as we see, this value of the slope is actually telling us how much will y change when x changes by 1 unit. In this case, when x increases by 1, y is going to change by minus 3. In the previous case, when x increases by 1, y is going to change by 3. So basically, the slope is telling us how much will y increase when x increases, and it also tells us about the direction of the change in y. This is why when we look at the slope, we need to look at two things. We need to look at the sign and we need to look at the magnitude. The sign of the slope tells us whether y will increase or decrease when x increases. If we go back to our example over here, this slope was positive. So when x increases, y increases. X increased from 2 to 3, y increased from 8 to 11. In the example in which the slope was negative, when x increased, y actually decreased. It decreased by 3. So the first piece of information that the slope gives us is that in what direction will y change. So basically, when the slope is positive, we know that increasing values of x's will result in increasing values of y. If the slope is negative, then we know that increasing values of x's will result in decreasing values of y. The other thing that we look at is the magnitude. The magnitude, and by this I mean the size of the coefficient. Over here, the size of the coefficient is minus 3. So basically it's telling me that when x increases by 1, y is going to decrease by 3. If the slope was minus 5, then we know that when x increases by 1, y is going to decrease by minus 5. The larger the magnitude of the slope, the larger the impact that x has on y. If we go to the example where the slope was positive, assume the slope was 10. If the slope was 10, this means that if x increases by only 1 unit, y is going to increase by 10 units. If the slope is 20, then it means that if x increases by 1 unit, y is going to increase by 20 units. So the slope is basically telling me about the direction of the relationship and the strength of the relationship. The sign tells me whether y increases when x increases or y decreases when x increases, and the magnitude tells me by how much is y going to change when x changes by 1 unit. If we perform a linear regression on our data set, what we will actually find, or what the statistical program will give us, is that the value of the slope is 1.22 and the value of the intercept is minus 13.2. If you know how to use a statistical software, you can try it now, because I have attached the data set to the previous lecture. The data set is labeled line 1. So when we run the regression in Stata or in any other statistical software, what we should see is that the value of the slope is 1.22 and the value of the intercept is minus 13.2. What does this mean? Well, first we look at the sign. the sign is positive, the sign of the slope. The sign of the slope is positive. This means that when attendance increases, GPA tends to increase. So now we have mathematical evidence that shows us that increasing values of attendance will result in increasing values of GPA. The other piece of information comes from the magnitude. This is 1.22. So what this means is that for every 1 unit increase in attendance, there is a 1.22 increase in GPA. So a student who has a grade on attendance that is 1 unit higher than another student would have a GPA that is 1.22 higher than that other student.